Hello and happy Halloween, fans. Joined by my little buddy Marty here, who's busy giving himself a little face wash, ain't ya? Oh, he's so cute. But I'm really excited to celebrate any holiday. It's a great time to get together with people you care about and have a party. And of course, one of the best things to do at Halloween is to watch a scary movie. And one of my favorite scary stories is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, this story was originally published in 1819, and it's, of course, by Washington Irving, whose other most famous work is Rip Van Winkle. And they were published together as part of an anthology. The rest of the stories in it aren't all that well known today. If you're going to find a copy of one, you're probably going to find it with the other, Rip Van Winkle and Legend of Sleepy Hollow, together. Both are short stories, so it makes sense to put them together to make a full book. In 1949, Disney also decided to combine The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with another story. They made a version of The Wind in the Willows, and they combined that with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow to make a package film. Now, back then, Disney did several of these. They put a bunch of short stories together with something linking them. For example, Melody Time is a package film like that. And they literally bookend these by showing stories in a library. And each story has a different narrator. Wind of the Willows is narrated by Basil Rathbone, and I'm going to be talking about that one at a later date. But of course, Legend of Sleepy Hollow is the part that has to do with Halloween. Legend of Sleepy Hollow is narrated by Bing Crosby, who is, of course, very, very famous as a singer and actor. In his time, he had people just you'll see cartoons showing people passing out at his concerts because apparently they just were fainting in his arms, swooning. Um, Very talented singer and actor, and he does a great job with this story. And it starts out with him taking the book off the shelf and introducing us to Ichabod Crane.
Old Icky, if you recall, was the country schoolmaster, dreamed up by Washington Irving. Oh, he had a way with a yarn, did Mr. Irving.
Yeah, Washington Irving is noted as a brilliant writer, and I don't think I realized how brilliant the first time I heard this story. But one of the real geniuses of this work, I'll save talking about that till a little later, one of my favorite aspects of the story. But another thing that he did really well wasn't just the plot. He was amazing at creating characters. And the way Ichabod is described in the cartoon is word for word taken from the book.
The worthy pedagogue was described as a most unusual man. See him striding along, one might well mistake him for some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. He was tall and exceedingly lank. His head was small and flat on top with a long snipe nose, so that it looked like a weathercock perched upon his spindle neck.
One of the other major characters in the story is Brom Bones. Now, he's described in the book as being somebody who liked to pull pranks on people, but it said there was no malice in his mischief. He just thought it was fun to play pranks, and nobody really ever made anything of it. We see him later pull the prank of teaching a dog to howl whenever Ichabod sings, that kind of thing. But he also does some stunts that border on dangerous and could have gotten people hurt. And Disney does well at showing his character in his introduction. We see right away how he doesn't really care about the safety of others, and we see how the townspeople laugh and they think, "Oh yeah, he's a manly man, and boys will be boys." So we get a good idea of that right from the start with him.
Their self-appointed leader, one Brom Bones, was a burly, roistering blade, always ready for a fight or a problem.
Yes, I know this is an animated feature, and in anything animated, people can do whatever they want without actual injuries happening. But this is still the way this is shown still shows that he's a reckless character. He's somebody who's, going about showing off what a man's man he is, and the townspeople love him for it. And take a look at him and tell me he's not related to Gaston. Seriously, you can tell where they got the inspiration for Gaston's ultimate character design from. And later on, when you see Katrina Van Tassel, who is the love interest of both Brown Bones and Ichabod, she's Cinderella. There's no other way to say it. Her character design is exactly the same as Cinderella, which was released 1 year after The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So they were clearly borrowing from that. Well, while we see a clear look at Brown Bones' character here and get an idea of what kind of a character he is, Ichabod gets a song that does a great job of showing not only his physical characteristics, but part of his personality as well.
Who's that coming down the street? Are they shovels or are they feet? Lean and lanky, skin and bone, with clothes and scarecrow, with into
This is a fantastic example of show, don't tell, which is an important thing to remember when you're telling a story. Rather than say this person is superstitious, you show them do something like avoid walking under a ladder. We also see some of Ichabod's less desirable qualities in this song.
Ichabod, maybe quaint, maybe odd, and maybe ain't. Anyway, there's no complaint from Ichabod.
That matches very much with the kind of person Ichabod is in the original story. He holds the gate for the lady while stealing a pie from her. We see that he's not necessarily the most moral person. He is a selfish person. We also see that he's a big eater. He's one of those people every dieter hates who could be eating 24/7 and not gain any weight at all. And he's basically a bottomless pit when it comes to food. So we see things about him here that help show who he is. And later on, of course, we get more of Bing Crosby in the role because in the original story and in here, in addition to being a teacher, he also makes a little, Ichabod also makes a little extra money from giving singing lessons. And the way he sings here, of course, that's classic Bing Crosby. This ba 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 boom. That's what everybody does when they try to imitate Bing Crosby. Now we get to the third most important character in the story, and that's Katrina, the mutual love interest. She is the richest prize around in more ways than one. Not only is she beautiful, but she's going to inherit all of her daddy's money.
Katrina Van Tassel, daughter and only child of old Baltus Van Tassel, the richest farmer in the county. She was a blooming lass, plump as a partridge, ripe, melting, and rosy cheeked.
I find it interesting that Katrina is described as being plump as a partridge, which she's obviously not drawn that way, but that is the description of her given in the book. And that's a good thing, because at one time, if you had a few extra pounds, that meant you had money. You could afford to eat well. That was a desirable thing. It's also interesting a little bit of background info here on Washington Irving's research for this story. Well, not really research, but inspiration. There is an old Dutch cemetery in Sleepy Hollow, and this story takes place in New York State. Sleepy Hollow is in New York, and that was mostly settled by Dutch immigrants. And in the old Dutch graveyard, there is a grave of a Katrina van Tassel, and it's almost certain that Washington Irving got her name from that gravestone. So a little bit of interesting background info there. Now, there is no real moral character in this story. Katrina is described in the book as being something of a coquette, and the song about her in the animated version actually says, "Once you've met that little coquette Katrina." In other words, she's a flirt. She's going to be flirting with all the guys. She's the richest prize around, and she knows it, and she's going to work that to her advantage. And it's very heavily implied that she's only showing any interest in Ichabod at all in order to make Brown Bones jealous. Ichabod isn't exactly the most moral guy either. Sure, he thinks Katrina's beautiful, but he's also thinking about all the money that comes along with her.
It's your father's farm. Boy, what a setup. There's gold in them acres and that, ain't they? Not to mention that lovely green stuff.
As if that weren't bad enough, he takes it a step further by actually looking forward to the day her father dies so he can inherit this. I'm not making this up. This is pretty bad.
Papa's only child. Papa. Well, the old goat can't take it with him, and when he cuts out, that's where I cut in.
Up until this point, this has been very faithful to the book, and that's one of the things that gets this version of the story a lot of praise. But with the book, a lot of it is description. It's about imagining all the great food he's going to get once he gets to be rich and the luxury he's going to have. He actually fantasizes all the time about the great food he's going to be able to eat rather than Katrina. She's his meal ticket, and there's no mistake about that. I mean, sure, he thinks she's beautiful, but as far as actually loving her, no. Ichabod does not honestly love her. He loves the life she's going to provide him. Not that I think he'd ever be cruel to her, but yeah, there's no actual love there. But anyway, a lot of the book is description, and Bing Crosby's narration does a great job of describing, what the different characters are like and all that. But a lot of it you can just see through the animation, like when they describe the party later on. And the animation in here is fantastic, especially for this time period. After World War II, Disney's projects were relatively low budget for a while. I mean, this is just two short, almost movies coupled together. Not really a high budget project, but the animation is impressive, especially your background scenes like at the dance and the countryside. You could easily frame any of them. Beautiful artwork. But for a while they deviate a bit from the book to show a bit of comedy, lighten the story up with the horror that's going to come. They show how Brown Bones gets bested all the time by Ichabod. And to me, I'm not sure if this was influenced by like Tom and Jerry or the Looney Tunes, but it seems to be. And it's funny, but it's not exactly what I would expect from Disney. things go on this way for a while, and we can see a lot of Katrina playing both of them. And this version does a phenomenal job of showing that. We see, for example, Brown Bones carrying all her stuff for all her packages while um, Ichabod opens doors for her, and at one point Ichabod has his coat over a mud puddle so she can walk on that without getting her feet wet. You know, traditional gentlemanly maneuver that you see in a lot of cartoons and old movies. And Brown rides by on his horse and picks her up and rides off with her, and she just waves bye at Ichabod and tosses her handkerchief at him, and doesn't really care that Brown just took her away. Um, and it's outright said in this version that the day her family sends out the invitations for their Halloween party, she deliberately adds a little extra note saying, "Please come on Ichabod's invitation," just to stoke the rivalry between Ichabod and Brown. Now, that's not directly said in the book that she does that, but it is implied that she's playing both of them. Interesting note about that. In most versions of this, the party that happens is a Halloween party, but that wouldn't have been the case. The book describes it as a quilting, it's a fall gathering. Everybody's having a party after all the fall work is done. That was really, common enough. But Halloween, even though it existed in the US, wasn't really a widely celebrated thing until the 1840s, long after the story was published, and even longer after the story is set. And Halloween was more popular at this time in areas with more of a Irish English background. New York at the time was a lot more Dutch immigrants. Remember, before it became New York, if you remember this from history class, it was New Amsterdam. So, really, this wouldn't have been a Halloween party. But it could easily enough have happened on October 31st. And obviously, with this being a ghost story, ultimately, it makes sense to say it happened at Halloween. Anyway, we see more of Katrina playing both of them at the party. Ichabod's dancing with her, and Brown gets the idea to start dancing with this heavy-set girl and switch partners so that he's dancing with Katrina. And Katrina obviously doesn't care who she dances with. I have to say, I really like that other girl. She knows she's not the most conventionally attractive person there, but she's gonna have fun at that party. I salute that. But a point is made that Brown can't compete with Ichabod with his dancing. In fact, there's a funny sequence where he tries to get Ichabod to fall into an open cellar door and tries all other kinds of things to get him to have an accident while dancing, and none of those work. But he finds out he's got another tool he can use against Ichabod. Ichabod is highly superstitious, and in this scene where Bram sees him throw salt over his shoulder, you can see the wheels turning in his head. I can use this.
I knew there was no more firm, potent believer in spooks and goblins than Ichabod Crane.
Marty's gotta give me some loving here. Did you wake up? Yeah? Well, if I ask the average person what they remember about this version of the story, they're going to say they remember Bing Crosby did the narration, they're going to remember the final chase scene, and they're going to remember this song. Like I said, Bing Crosby was, of course, famous as a singer. But he's also very much in character when he sings the song Brom Bones. He doesn't just sing it, he actually does act it, which of course is what he's supposed to do given that he's voicing the character at this point rather than narrating. But he still does a wonderful job of it, and it's one of the most fun parts of the story, which of course, it was meant to be in the story as well, because that's what all the characters are having fun doing at this point, sharing ghost stories. And Bram knows he can use this one to really scare Ichabod.
Jamboree, they break it up with this glee. Goes to bad with the one that's cursed is the headless horseman. He's the worst.
If you watch Bram during this scene, we get some clues as to what might be actually the real story of what happens later. We know, of course, that Ichabod encounters the Headless Horseman. Everybody knows that. But now, why would Bram just tell this story unless it leads to something? We know he got that look on his face like he's got a plot. But now, was this plot just to scare Ichabod, or was there a lot more to it than that? And we get a clue to that here. Watch this sword that he has, and watch how he handles it.
Say he's tired of his flaming top. He's got a yen to make a swap. So he rides one night to find a head in the hollow.
Maybe it's just coincidence. But when I was doing my research for this, I found out that sword is not the most common sword around, and it's the same sword that the Headless Horseman has later. Coincidence, or does it point to Bram actually being the Headless Horseman? This is a clue that's put into the movie version, but there are clues in the book version as well. And that's really interesting that while Disney does change some details, they are also careful to both hint that Bram is actually the horseman, but there's also hints that it really is a ghost that Ichabod encounters. So that's a lot of fun to speculate, which is it? Well, either way, Ichabod's about to encounter him on the way home. Now, this version changes a detail from the book. In the book, Ichabod stays after the party, which was a big mistake, especially given that he's just heard a warning about a headless horseman being around. You would think he'd want to leave when everybody else left, but no, he stayed behind in the book version to propose to Katrina. At least it's heavily implied that was his reasoning. And she obviously rejected him because he was seen leaving in a very sour mood. That might have something to do with later, and I'll explain that when we get to that point. But for now, in both versions, he's on his way home, and he is scared. He starts imagining any little noise is the horseman coming to get him or the voice of a ghost. And I think that's a neat way to show it, how our own fears when we're out in the dark can get the better of us. We hear a noise and we think that it's something that it isn't. And Ichabod ends up having a good laugh at that when he realizes what he thought was the sound of another horse being ridden after him is just the sound of cattails being blown in the wind against a log. But their laughter doesn't last long. The animation in this is really wonderful throughout the whole story, but it's in this scene where they really take it up a notch. They have so many neat details. Like when Ichabod's riding through the woods just before the encounter, you see the clouds looking like their hands closing in around the moon. Whenever the Headless Horseman is shown, the sky's red, and when it's behind Ichabod, it's green. So we can see that there's a lot of detail even in the background here, and they really went all out. That doesn't mean they don't include some humor in this, and that's one of the brilliant things of this is they combine the really seriously artistic horror storytelling with comedy. And there's a lot of, and that would be my cat knocking things over in the kitchen. But they combine comedy with the horror here to lighten it up just enough for kids. For example, they have at one point in the chase, Ichabod ends up on the back of the Headless Horseman's horse, and there's this clip here where he almost makes it to the bridge. And Brahmin told him, once you're across the bridge, you're safe. Once you cross that bridge, my friend, the ghost is gone, his power ends. And yet, they slip in the mud and end up heading right back towards the Headless Horseman. Like I said, just the right amount of comedy mixed with the scary to lighten it up enough where it's not too bad for a little kid to watch. But now, here comes one of the most scary parts. Sometimes with a horror movie or ghost story, the scariest thing is what you don't see, what you don't find out. Ichabod looks straight down where the Headless Horseman's head should be. And we don't know what he sees there, but whatever it is scares him more than anything he's encountered so far. What did Ichabod see here that made him that afraid? We saw how afraid he was before, but this goes beyond that. He wouldn't have acted that afraid, I don't think, if he had seen it was just Bram. Or did he see Bram and realize Bram was out to kill him? If it wasn't Bram, why did Bram tell that ghost story then? Just to make Ichabod look like a coward when he was afraid of the story? And we did see Katrina laugh a little at Ichabod in that scene, so maybe that was the point? Or maybe this is Bram. I don't know, I think this part makes it look more like this is a real ghost. But that's the fun of this. We don't know, and it's up to us to speculate. Quick note here about the voices. Um, the the Headless Horseman's laugh is not done by the same actor who does Brom Bones, who is of course Bing Crosby. He does all the other voices. Pinto Calvig does the voice of the Headless Horseman and the sound effects of the Headless Horseman's horse. Now he's best known for playing Goofy, and Clarence Nass does the sound effects and the neighs that sound like laughs for Ichabod's horse Gunpowder. So we get two classic Disney actors here, the original voice of Goofy and the original voice of Donald Duck, which I think is really cool. Well, whatever Ichabod saw looking down that Headless Horseman, he's not going to miss going for that bridge a second time. Now this is interesting. He's made it across the bridge and the ghost stops there. He throws the pumpkin, but the ghost himself is stopped, like the legend says he should be. So this indicates that this is really the ghost. Now in the book, Ichabod makes it across the bridge and looks back to see if the ghost was still pursuing or if he disappeared like the legend said he was supposed to, only to see the Headless Horseman pass him and throw something at him, which indicates that this was not the ghost, that it really was Bram. So did one version did one version mean to say that it was Bram, and the other version mean to say it was the real ghost? Or not? We still don't know. Let me know what you think in your comments. But there's still a few more clues left. In the original book, Ichabod saw the Headless Horseman with what he saw as the horseman's head on the saddle. But the next morning, what was found, Ichabod thought he threw the head at him. But the next morning, what was found was the shattered jack-o'-lantern.
Next morning, Ichabod's hat was found. And close beside it, a shattered pumpkin. But there was no trace of the schoolmaster.
Ichabod only thought he saw the horseman's head on the pommel of the saddle, riding up front of the horseman. He thought he saw that in his fear, but it turned out what was thrown at him was really a pumpkin. This indicates that it was Brom Bones, because it wasn't a real head thrown at him. And of course, Brom wouldn't have had a real head, he just used a pumpkin to scare Ichabod. Which, being the superstitious and frightful kind of person Ichabod was, that would have been enough to do the job. Now, all we know for sure after this point is Ichabod was never seen in Sleepy Hollow again. But, according to both the book and the Disney version, others claim they saw Ichabod alive and well in another town later, married to a wealthy widow. Now this... Now this could have really happened, that he just left town. Because in the book version, he just had an argument with Katrina. It was clear she wasn't going to marry him. He had no more reason to stay. He was an itinerant teacher. He went from one town to the next, picking up a teaching job for a while and then moving on, which was fairly common back then. So he didn't really have any ties to a single place. And him marrying a wealthy widow to get her money is definitely in character. That could have happened, that he just got scared away. It's also possible that he really encountered the ghost and was taken away by him, or he could have been scared off, whether it was really the ghost or Bram. He could have been killed, whether it was the ghost or Bram. We've heard in the beginning that there was no malice in Bram's mischief, but he wouldn't be the first person in literature, or in real life for that matter, to kill to eliminate a rival in love. So we don't know if that might have happened. We do know in the book, both the book and this version, that Bram married Katrina soon after. And another neat detail, they show Katrina in a green wedding dress in this version. White wedding dresses didn't become popular until Queen Victoria got married in one long after this. So historical accuracy, Disney, I salute you for that. Back before then, women just got married in their best wedding dress, and they're in their best dress. That served as their wedding dress. Maybe it was white, but probably wasn't. They probably would have saved the white dress. Because, they would have wanted, well, depending on the social class. But anyway, historical accuracy there. And we do know that Bram is said to have gotten a knowing look whenever Ichabod was mentioned. Now, this doesn't mean that Ichabod's necessarily dead. It could just mean he scared him off and he knew it. We don't know. And that's one of the beauties of the story, is it's really open to interpretation. Most versions tend to have it be where the ghost was real and Ichabod got killed by the ghost. But I have actually heard of another version where it was Bram, and later Ichabod finds out about it and he dresses up as the Headless Horseman and scares Bram off in the end. That obviously didn't happen in the original. But there's a lot of room to play with here with theories, and I love that. Let me know in the comments what you think Ichabod's ultimate fate was. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a wonderful Halloween. And until next time, Remember the magic.